Thank you very much. It is 9 o'clock Pacific here. So Mr. Hamlin, you are in charge for the next 15 minutes. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much. And gentlemen, good morning and welcome to Industry Week. You guys are on the firing line right here, and we're ready to lock and load and make something happen. What do you think?
Well, hello from
Good.
Indianapolis, Indiana.
I'm John from Chicago, Illinois.
All right, guys. Well, so John, why don't you real quick, I know we're going to be joined by some more folks, as we move through the rest of this 55 minutes that we've got. But how about briefly tell me the history of EMCO Gears and how they got into motorsports? I mean, I've been doing a little bit of back reading, but those haven't had the time maybe get on the internet and check things out or have history with you folks. Share it with us.
Yeah, so we started in racing 1966 with AJ Foyt Racing. He was racing in the Indianapolis 500, and they were having trouble in years past with the gears. So they went and contacted a customer of ours, McDonnell Douglas, looking for some higher quality gears. So that's when we first started making race gears for them, where we would take designs that our engineers had and make the gears for them through processes that we learned back then through the aircraft industry that we did. And pretty much since then, we've had parts in the Indianapolis 500 on different forms. We've done, transmission gears. We've done complete transmissions. We've done drive shafts. We've done axle systems for customers there and steering systems there. So a lot of gear parts and engine gears too at the Indianapolis 500. So that's kind of where we started in October. One of the big things, my grandfather passed away in April of 1991. And then in October of 92, my dad and my brother and I started working at EMCO Gears. At that point, when I started there, we started bringing in a lot of engineering stuff, so where we would do design work for teams. So like back in Indy, you'd have a customer chief mechanic wanting something just a little bit different on his brand X transmission, and so he'd come to us with an idea, and we'd switch the design around a little bit, maybe change a snap ring and the shoulder on two different parts, so that a mechanic could take the gearbox apart and back together. Back then they were doing loads of gear changes, like at Indy. Every practice they'd go out in May, they'd come back and rechange the gears and get new gears. So we'd have a garage there. W4 was our garage that we had for the longest time there. And so they'd come in and, get different gears and go out and change things. And then with all that engineering, we moved, we did sports car stuff and NASCAR stuff. And now a big push that we're in is in the Trans Am series. So we've been moving around. Anything else to add, Larry, to the history?
No, I mean, that's a good brief history. I mean, there's so many little T's to cross and I's to dot over the years. A lot of people are unaware of the involvement that we had across the motorsports platform. A lot of times we didn't have our name on the side of the transmission, but our products were in there, sometimes known to people, sometimes not known to people. You mentioned Jacques Villeneuve's 1995 PPG championship. And so that was the same year that he won the 500. And maybe you could sprinkle a little bit of salt on that story.
Well, that year, so there were two things that were going on that year. One, we made a new diff for him. So right at that time, a lot of viscous coupler differentials were coming out, but most, and that was for teams that had a lot of money to spend to do that. But the smaller teams were running a Salisbury ramp style differential, and a lot of times when they got on the power, they couldn't get the ramp angle; it would just lock the tires up right away. So it was hard to have control of the car through chicanes. So we designed a differential that actually used the separating force of the spider and the planet to force the ramps apart. So it was it wouldn't lock the wheels completely like the Salisbury diff, but it was enough where you'd get some differentiation so that on chicanes, they could be on the power and still be controlling the car through a chicane. So, I mean, it was really exciting for me as a fan to design it and then go up to Road America. And he and the Penske cars, I mean, they were half a second faster around the track, and it was just because in the chicanes it could do it. So it was exciting that, I mean, it was a lot of him, but to see our product out there and then win that race and be there at the track for it, and then go home and tell my friends, oh yeah, what do you do? Well, yeah, you go watch the race. That's what I do. So, you know, very exciting to see that stuff. They also had, that was a time when there was a huge transition in engine RPM. So Ford there started the season at, you know, like 8,000 RPM and ended the season at 14,000 RPM. So we were making a lot of gears because they were going to the track, and engine RPM was changing. So we were able to make new change gears for them at different ratio and get them to the track before they went to the different tracks all along the way. So a very exciting season to be with them.
The thing is kind of funny, you know, what you just guys have pointed out is you're probably one of the best kept secrets in racing for a lot of years, because your stuff was almost like proprietary. You know, people would, you know, would get something done through your company, but they're not telling anybody. And I've often laughed and thought about the fact that in my way of thinking, it's almost like you took a lot of good drivers and made them great drivers because your product, number one, was much more, it was almost indestructible. And some of these guys were not as good at shifting as they needed to be, or wheel hop or anything like that. But because of, you know, some of the improvements in your quality of the material, cut of your gear, you know, everything about it made some of these guys better road racers, especially, and gave us some durability in places where we needed it, which, you know, in races and years before, we didn't have it. Would you agree?
Yeah, definitely. We are behind the scenes. I was just, you know, talking to Larry, but we're based in like problem solving little things. But most of our customers in the auto racing, yeah, they want us behind the scenes. I think they want to solve those problems and don't really want to point out problems that they had or what we improve. So you just mentioned that. I don't think I'm going to go through the bus of some drivers that are out there. But yeah, wheel hopping, older gears. They wouldn't survive one wheel hop. Now every you know driver is going to have a wheel hop every once in a while, but when you can get something that's going to last 3 or 4 or 5 you know bad shifts going down into a pit from fourth to third and not wheel hopping, yeah, if they can do that and not have a failure, that's going to help them out a lot versus, you know, one mistake and they're out of the race. So we've done a lot of help with drivers and teams.
You know, speaking of that help, you know, John, what are some of the gear products that you guys make that, you know, have really kind of like, I feel like, revolutionized the drivetrain?
Well, one of the big things that we did, and it goes through like all of our stuff, but it comes down to the designing of the gear profile in itself. And we, you know, come from a lot of engineering background and a lot of data that's been done, but the racing series is very aggressive on gears. So they have harsh situations where sometimes you don't have enough oil in the gearbox. You have to take a look at that. So we've, you know, designed the gears and changed the pitch and the pressure angle and selected oils that we can evaluate how large the OD of the gear should be to make sure that there's rolling and sliding going on, but the gear is going to survive if they have an situation where they don't have oil. So we were at Pocono, one example, and yeah, the team forgot, this is just a test, but they forgot to put oil in the transmission. And they went out and tested all day, 60 miles, and had a successful test. And then they realized, wait a second, we didn't have any oil in the gearbox. So they were able to complete a day of testing because our gearbox was there and they wouldn't have to pull it off. You know, other competitors, that would have ruined their whole test day. They would have gone out and in a lap and a half, they would have burnt their gearbox up and they would come in and they'd been pulling the gearbox out of the car and resetting up the car and going back, you know, just some simple stuff like that by being able to design to have something handle, you know, harsh conditions. That was just a practice, but races, things happen all the time. So yeah.
Okay, I want to recomment what I said. I don't want to be picking on the drivers. Also on mechanics and car chiefs that don't do their jobs like they should and check all the checklists off. Though, Larry, I see you've got a little bit of a teaser sitting there behind you with a box. Want to share that with us or give us some more insight,
Sure.
maybe from your perspective of it? Because I know
Sure.
Indianapolis is kind of notorious for racers, and I'm sure you get a lot of people dropping by the shop all the time.
Well, that's our latest and greatest 5-speed sequential gearbox that we introduced in 2017 in the Trans Am series. Now you're talking, is Chris on here? I don't know if Chris has joined us yet or not.
I'm here, Larry. Hi.
Okay,
He's
Chris,
hiding.
he can chime in here any, but I think Chris, you joined in 2018, I believe, was your first year.
Yeah, that's right,
And-
Larry. We've been running with you guys every year since 18.
So in 2017, we introduced that gearbox. You're talking 76 pounds. You're talking ex-NASCAR engines. These guys have tuned these engines to turn almost 900 horsepower and amazing foot-pounds of torque. You're talking about 2,450-pound car. No driver's aids. And we were fortunate enough to have a great team of EMCO Gear engineers. And I'm lucky enough to have a great guy here in Indianapolis named Mick Austin, who just puts his head around everything we do. And we designed this, and we went out, we won the championship the first year. We won the championship the second year. It's now in its 5th year, and it's won another championship with Chris. The display piece we have behind me, if you look close enough, you can see what looks like a flywheel on the front of that. Can you guys see that? All right. I don't know if you can see it good enough, but it's on the, so that particular is one of the latest models, and it's called the reverse clutch model. A Trans Am TA car by design is very difficult to service the clutch. We got there in 2017. Guys were pulling the motors and losing a whole session to service their transmission, service their clutch, sorry. So we went to work and we said, hey, we've done a similar project in sports car. Why don't we put the clutch on the front of the transmission? So all the guys got to do is pull the transmission, and then there's the clutch right there. You can service the clutch, or you can, which up front happens to be the drop gears behind that cover. So you can service the drop gear, not disturb the clutch. So that's the latest and greatest right there.
That's pretty spectacular. I mean, the way that we've always kind of thought about transmissions in the race world, and again, I'm going back old school, the T10s, the regular, 4 speeds and everything, the Borg Warners that everybody had way back in the day. And I was looking through some of your product line, and I saw that one, and it made me stop and realize I didn't see anything that looked like a regular 4-speed in y'all's product line. I'm not saying you don't make gears for them, but that's not the way of the future. I mean, transaxles and everything that you're talking about, sequential gearboxes, it's the now of racing. I ain't gonna say the future of racing, but it's the now of racing, and you guys
it's the now.
look like you got it covered.
I like to think we have it covered. I mean, we've got a few things in the burner right now, some things that are going on behind the scenes that we're working on really hard to make sure that we're put ourselves in the right place at the right time, when these doors open.
So Chris, I know I can't see you, but I got to ask you from a driver's perspective and being associated with these guys for such a long period of time, share some of your experiences and the pros and the cons of what you've run into from that side of the coin.
Well, Jeff, I'm sorry I can't see you. I'm in a situation where my screen isn't stable enough. But no, we've enjoyed a very good few seasons with EMCO, and we've worked very closely with Larry every single event, and with Mick as well. We've really leveraged their at-track presence. They're integrated members of the team, and we've gotten to the point where as we've made engine development and made power and torque in different spots, and we've made chassis improvements, the gearing needs have changed. And, Larry has been right there with us. The Trans Am series is very competitive. It's a series where development's still allowed. So teams are making steps every single weekend. It's one of the few realms of the sport where the teams are still encouraged to innovate. And in that respect, you've got to make sure that your partners are on side. And Larry and Mick have been there every step of the way. And I'd like to think that we'd never been short of the gears that we need or the gear stacks that we need. And Larry and his team is a big reason for that. They were also extremely helpful for us, having done a lot of gearbox servicing ourselves and having an in-house gearbox technician, at making sure that he was up to speed so he could do the maintenance for our two cars in between events. And that was a real hand in glove situation. Not all teams have the resource of having a transmission expert in-house, but they worked very, very collaboratively the whole way. And I'd like to think that we both helped each other to improve.
I agree. I'd like to add one more thing there. I think one of the things that sets EMCO Gears on the highest level of what we design and what we build. I mean, it all starts with people. We've got great people that work for us. Mm-hmm. We make great products. We've got a great quality control system. And you can put that all together and you can ship it out to a customer. And if that's where it ends and you stick the check in the bank, you're not always going to succeed. And one of the things that I learned starting when I took over the service department in 1998 here was that you got to be able to service, support what you manufacture. And that goes hand in feet with everybody that we talk to and all the successes we've had. People really appreciate the fact that you're there for them. You take care of them. If there's a problem, you're there to check it out. Hey, don't worry about it when we get back. The shop, the guys will be all over it. So that's one thing, that I'm pretty proud of is that fact, that little fact.
Well, guys, one of the things we're already getting a few questions, and folks, I know we got folks out there that are watching and listening. Don't be afraid to send us some questions for these guys. Chris is here, even though we can't see him. And again, I appreciate you hanging in there, Chris, because again, it's good to hear from you because you never know when somebody wants to know something that I can't answer because I'm not a professional race car driver or have that personal, I guess you might say, relationship with these guys like you do. But John's already asking right now, what is there any kind of recommended specific transmission fluid for your products, and how often do you recommend changing it? And I'd say that's probably a pretty common thought, but I'm sure each one of these products has a different need. I mean, that brand new baby you got sitting there behind you, Larry, I mean, I'm sure it doesn't take 120 weight gear oil like we used to put in there. I bet you it takes something a little bit more sophisticated than that.
I mean, there's qualifying oils out there right now. There's guys running 16 weight, 15 weight. You probably remember from your NASCAR days hanging around there, guys, they put water in that thing for qualifying if you could make it live.
You weren't supposed to tell that kind of stuff.
But yeah, we've been up and down that. I mean, for us, in this particular model here, believe it or not, it's good old fashioned 75/90 synthetic. It's good old Mobile One, Motul. I see they're a sponsor in the background. They make a great product. Any of the high top end 75/90s. And that's not to say that there's somebody out there who's doing something that we don't know about, because it's wide open. But that's nothing trick there on that one.
So John, you talk about your family and kind of like how you got started. Do you have an engineering degree, or this is on-the-job training for you and through the history of the business?
I am a physics and economics major from Michigan. Good to bring up the win we had over the weekend. But yes, so that's not engineering. I plan to, with my physics and economics, work here to kind of manage engineers. So I'm kind of on the higher end. We have, engineers here that I'm trying to help manage. So try and direct kind of projects but definitely pushing towards engineering. Like I said, in '92, when I got here, EMCO didn't have any engineering. We were really just making blueprints to people that were sending us the information and gear geometry and things like that. So definitely pushed in. I do hands-on the gear design stuff. So I was very involved in gear design stuff. I do a lot of decision making and discussions on making of the transmissions, but we have people that specialize in the finite element analysis that has to get done on shafts. So we do 3D modeling of everything to model our parts, and that's come a long way. So yes, so I do a lot of the engineering, but now it's more managing the engineering and try and get the big picture. Some engineers get caught in the small stuff, so you got to stay above it and get the answer that you need. A lot of times you can get the answer pretty quickly, 80-90% of the problem solved, and then you can focus that last little bit on the last 10. But so I'm managing the engineering.
With that being said, what's the most important part of when you're doing a new project like that and coming up with is it the right size of gear, the heat treatment of gear, the pitch of the tooth? I mean, all of these. I mean, how does this? How did this product that Larry's got back here, that sequential gearbox, how did it come about, and how long did it take for it to get to where you're racing it like right now, and you have the complete confidence that Chris and his group can go out and win with it?
Yeah, so the big thing is early on collecting the data and understanding what the customers and what's going on in the series. Like Chris had mentioned, Trans Am's great because they're still letting teams develop stuff. So you can get input from your customer and from their engineers and who's developing the car. So trying to collect all that data, what weight of the car, what kind of horsepower are they planning to go, what kind of tires are they planning to use. You kind of mentioned that question. What kind of gear oils do they want to use? You can design the gears around, well, yeah, all these people, are they going to use 75/90? Or they all know we all want this trick stuff that's much thinner and lighter. Well, you go, we got to take a look at the gear design then, because we can change the pitch and the pressure angle and some of that rolling diameter. So early on, it's that stuff. Also, how they plan on shifting it. How much shifting do they do? Are they, when we early got there, they were just getting into shift without lift with a carbureted engine. So there was a big bang every time they would just pull the thing back and just let fuel flow in and just cut the spark. And it would be a big bang every time they shift with explosion out the exhaust pipe because they had the fuel. So we're going to know, we got to try and figure out what are we going to do better? How are we going to improve their shift and improve these gears, realizing, well, that's going to happen. That can destroy a drivetrain having a big explosion after they dump a bunch of fuel in there on that shift cut stuff. So a lot of engineering earlier on, a lot of knowledge from the past. Like we talk about engineering on that project, but just learning stuff in our machining. So we have CNC machines, and you go to the different tool manufacturers and you learn, wow, they've designed a boring bar that can reduce vibration and dampening. So this allowed us to, before we were like, no way, we're not putting that hole in there, 5 inches, it's going to have chatter at the bottom. Well, now we've realized you've got tooling and new machines and greater control over your machine to, oh yeah, we can put that in and we'll have perfect, finish all the way down to the bottom of that deep hole. So now you can lighten it up and not worry about tool marks or chatter that historically, we see people bring us shafts that have broken. It's just because, machining, wasn't there in a deep hole that used to be really hard to do, and they're trying to take some extra weight out. So we work on our engineering from not just what the customer wants, but from our manufacturing engineer to bring processes and techniques that we've learned to the fruition as we see other things happening.
I haven't asked anybody this question throughout this entire season because I hadn't had an opportunity, but it seems like this might be a proper place to ask. When you design something and you want to put it into, like you do a 3D on it, can you design a transmission and then wind up put it into a simulation where you could practice with it and not have a real one? Is that doable today's technology?
You mean simulating on a computer the transmission? We can. Yes, we can
So I
do
mean,
that.
like what I'm saying is you could give that and Chris could be running it and he could get some kind of feel on a simulation type deal. Am I stretching it too far here?
You're stretching that a little too far. We haven't gone too far. I'm not sure, Chris, do you use a driver simulation? But I know there's out there, but we haven't done that with anyone. We do use simulation on our end to evaluate the gear train and the gearbox, but it hasn't come to like a full-on car where Chris would get in a simulator and know this is our new gearbox and how it would feel. So we haven't gotten that far yet, but that is a direction to go for sure.
Yeah. Well, what about Chris and Larry? You get this, you get a new transmission and you want to go test it. Tell us about going testing and what you're usually looking to do when you get to the racetrack. And is there a racetrack that you want to go to more than another because it gives you variables that other tracks don't give, where you kind of cover the whole gamut in one racetrack? Is there one that's ideal to go test at?
Chris,
Jeff,
go ahead.
Jeff, that's a great question. You know, I think with the torque profile of our engines, you would think we'd be able to 4-speed and be happy everywhere. But, you know, there's a lot of the tracks that have a broad variety of corners that, you know, ultimately, I think Trans Am's schedule is made up of probably the most classical venues of really anybody's schedule in North America. So there's not a lot of tracks that are, you know, particular or quirky that are on our schedule. Yeah, having said that, with as much horsepower as we're running, and the fact that the Trans Am cars are, you know, not overly stuck with downforce, you know, we've benefited from running a 5-speed at pretty much all tracks. So it's really a question of managing the torque delivery. You know, because keeping the tire pressures on the rears is so vital, and trying to keep tire life is so important. But at the same time, you want to have that torque burst when you need it. So, you know, we've been able to build a good cookbook where we've got I think a good range, but it all tethers to whatever the top speed is. And, you know, some of these tracks were upwards of 190, 200 miles an hour. You know, you're going to need a pretty broad range of gears if you're going to 5-speed. And I think that Larry and Mick have been able to help us find that balance for torque delivery and also getting the right gear split, so that way we're never really out of the power band.
I think one of the unique things about this transmission here is it utilizes a slip-on first gear, which a lot of transmission manufacturers design around a first gear being made on a shaft, and it kind of limits the scope, the range for a first gear. With the way we've designed this transmission, you're able to take 110, 120 mile an hour first gear, for example, at like when we were at Daytona, and you're able to put that in the car again, and you got to get out of the pits with it too, so it can be challenging at times. But that way you're able to run it as an actual true 5-speed, and that's one of the things. One of the big advantages we have over the competition right now is guys can gear that thing for five speeds on the track.
Well, let's ask this question here. Todd Lacey would like to know, are you guys able, I think I already know the answer, but are you able to rebuild vintage racing gear sets? And again, I'm not sure what his demand is here as far as, you know, what type of vintage car he's referring to, because I can't imagine that as long as it's not, you know, some kind of 1941 something, you may have everything covered otherwise.
Well, I can answer, John, if you don't. I can answer, and I know what John's going to say, and it can be 1940, it can be 1913. John might be able to tell you how far some of the old gears that we've made for historic, you know, guys that have restored cars. But the answer is absolutely yes, and that's one of the things that we do besides our big transmission projects is we've made gears for Ferraris and Alfa Romeos and ring and pinions for, you know, these cars that nobody can get parts anymore for them.
We redid the transmission for a 1954 Ferrari that was at Le Mans. And then in 2000, I went to the racetrack and he ran on the historics and he got in an accident on turn 1.
Oh, no.
It costs a lot of money, but yeah, we do historic stuff, and it's very exciting to watch those cars. I mean, it's great to see those out there running, but yeah.
You know, with looking at the number of associations and that are affiliated with your company, do both of y'all find yourself, you know, traveling all over the world because of it? I mean, you know, you do Trans Am, you do IndyCar, you do IMSA, you know, you've got stuff going on all the time. I mean, you can make a 2-speed gearbox for a Silver Crown car. So, you know, it's like, would it be unusual to find you or your company being represented at a dirt track or at Le Mans, you know, here up in 2022? Is it going to be, it's something like that? You guys at the racetrack a lot?
Well, we're at the racetrack, and I'm talking about the Indianapolis team a lot. A dirt track, you're going to see me there, but I'm going to have maybe a cold beer and some popcorn. I'll be attending as a spectator. You know, I really enjoyed the SRX series this year, watching Ernie Francis, who actually drove the TA car in 2017 and 2018 and won those 2 championships, and get in that car and do that. No dirt tracking for us right now. The 2-speed was just it filled in when the Silver Crown cars were running with the IRL at the big 2-mile tracks.
Mm-hmm. Well, number one, thank you for saying that about the SRX, because I had an opportunity to work with Ernie, and first class individual, very talented, adaptable, and I really it was I guess you might say a treat for me to be around somebody that, you know, just you coach him up a little bit, and he's got the incentive, but at the same time, the common sense to know how to approach something and get the best out of it. He did a really, really good job and represented the Trans Am series and his overall natural ability very well this past season.
I think Chris would probably comment that there were a lot of times, and this year they had some mechanical problems, but he definitely kept you honest, right, Chris?
Oh, every step of the way. And I think that's vice versa. You know,
yes,
we've had some,
absolutely.
He and I have had some tremendous battles the last few years. And, you know, I think we both helped raise each other's games.
Well, guys, we touched it on the SRX deal, but is there anything else? Because, you know, you started, John, talking about how your history got you into the industry you're in, you know, with AJ Foyt calling you. I'm just wondering if that's the one we saw at Indy that year when he got out with the hammer and the long pull bar and everything like that was beaten on it. Was that where you guys came in and saved the day or saved somebody's job? Because I don't think AJ, you know, we all know that if AJ gets upset, he is very upset.
We've had a long history with AJ. He's been upset with us too. So yeah, he does. He's very demanding, that's for sure. But yeah, it's fun to see the energy that he has at the track.
He's got a passion. He's got a passion like no other driver I've ever had the privilege of being around or watching. And again, just to say that I know him, you know, makes me feel somewhat lucky, and at the same time, lucky that I never went to work for him. But you know, the thing is about, you know, your company and where you're taking it and what is the next, what's going to be the next step? I mean, really, are we going to see a lot of this product that we are used to seeing at the Snowball Derby or where Chris is racing? What's going to be the next step? Is everybody eventually going to get away from the old solid rear ends and go transaxles and sequential transmission? Is that what's going to happen?
Yes, I do think that that transaxle and sequential shifting. I think there's going to be a lot of questions put onto the shift lever itself and paddle shifting. I know a lot of high-end supercars have paddle shifting, but I still think with a lot of grassroots, there still is going to be a lot of fan base that's going to want to see a shift lever and want to really see people using the shift lever. Keep some driver stuff in there, but the sequential shift mechanism, some electronics in our shift without lift thing to help assist the driver. But I think they're still going to want to see a lot more, driver input. Racing's not going to be about letting a computer control all your shifts and all that stuff. So there's still going to be some manual kind of mechanism that's going to have to stay involved in racing. That's what I still see happening. But it's working with the teams and sanctioning bodies to see what's going to be the best fit for them.
So what do you think about that, Chris? I mean, from your viewpoint, as far as an owner and a driver, where does the racing series themselves need to put their foot down? Because as John pointed out, and I'm sure, that Larry feels the same way, you guys could make a computer shift this some gun if you want to. You basically all you got to do is sit in there and steer it. And to me, that's not real racing. I mean, you take too much of the human element out, and all of a sudden we change the sport dramatically.
I think one of the central appeals of Trans Am racing in TA1 and TA2 is that driver input matters, a lot more than it does in the series where there's the driver aids, whether that's the ABS, the paddle shifts, traction control. Trans Am still celebrates the driver as a central part of success. And yeah, you can build spaceships, and I've raced them. I mean, we had a lot of success in prototypes, and I would never say I was less of a human when I was driving those cars. I mean, the performance ceiling was through the roof, and I think by and large, the guys that had their act together, who had done the best job, still won the races. But I think that Trans Am has always been about kind of taming the beasts, for lack of a better term. And I think when you start to take away some of the variables that separate the good drivers from regular drivers, not making mistakes and executing the inputs manually is a big part of the story. And that's why I, in a lot of ways, I consider my Trans Am championship and my Trans Am wins to be so significant. I'm also old enough to remember what it was like to have to change gear. When I came up in racing, a lot of the paddle shifting and automated electronics were still kind of just in F1. And, for me, it was a throwback to go back to the old way. But I think there's still a lot to be said for, the human element of making it happen. And, obviously, when you look at NASCAR, they've built an entire franchise around, cars that are still very much, reliant on the driver making the right inputs and not making mistakes. And I think, you don't fix what ain't broken, as the saying goes.
Hey guys, are you still able to hear me okay?
No, you're doing fine.
Good.
Hear you good.
My technology, my AirPods went dead, so I just wanted to make sure now I'm on microphone.
No, you're doing fine, and I can appreciate that. I think that a lot of us, I got my volume here on my computer up as loud as I can get it, so I can make sure I don't miss anybody talking to me. I guess you got to say price we pay for the job we love. But when you go back and you touch on all of this stuff that we're looking at with the technologies, and now NASCAR making a big step toward modern racing, I guess I'd say, and they're still kind of hanging on with the Xfinity and the trucks and the rest of their series, being pretty much basic four speed, nothing elaborate. But now with this one, I got to ask the question, have you discussed anything, or you guys talked to people in NASCAR about some of the pros and cons of what they're getting into?
Well, John and I spent a fair amount of time, it was 2017, right, John?
Yeah.
Down there, talking with the powers to be. And, we bid on the Transaxle, and we were one of the three finalists, and we came in second place, was just the first loser, unfortunately, but we were able to listened to them. And one of the things that they were adamant about was the fact that the driver still was going to be stick shift in the car. And they wanted that in-car camera. They wanted, even though it wasn't going to be an H pattern, they were going to be pulling back and forth on it. They wanted the fans to be able to see the driver shift in the car. And, you know, we said, yeah, but not everybody knows how to drive a stick shift. Not everybody knows how to throttle blip. No, and, you know, it goes back to Chris, and Chris is a good driver who can drive a stick shift car without the aids. Is probably, you know, those guys are going to fall into the winner category. And then we think, you know, there possibly could be this category of a big learning curve. I don't think on the oval so much, but I think when they go to the road courses. But anyways, we tried a little bit to push them in the direction of maybe putting paddles, switches on a stick. And so that way the computer could control it. And because NASCAR also says, you know, we don't want 15 or 20 guys falling out of the race with the transmission problem. We want all of our cars to finish. And if they finish, it's going to be because they crash, because as they told us, we crash a lot of cars. So, so we have taken that stick shift theory and we moved it to an opportunity in Trans Am 2. We call it our para power. It's an opportunity for a driver, paraplegic, whether he has no use of his legs or his lower torso or he's missing, to be able to get into a TA2 car and to be able to operate that and operate on a competitive level where nobody says, oh, he has an unfair advantage. So that's just, I had to share the stick shift story with you because it kind of started out as one of Mick's ideas and then it just took off and it's gained a lot of traction.
It sounds to me like, you know, as I said earlier, you guys have taken a lot of drivers and made them better racers because with your technology and the common sense approach about how you do something. And in the end, you have complimented everybody, I think, in every series around the world, one way, shape, or form. And I think it's really a tribute to y'all. And Chris, you know, when you see and you hear NASCAR talking about what they're doing and what they don't want to have happen, what kind of advice can you reach out and tell those guys, you know, from somebody who sits behind that wheel and who's driven, you know, some of the most elaborate technology in today's world as far as racing is concerned?
I don't have to give advice to any of the guys that are running the top levels of NASCAR. I mean, you're talking about, you know, one of the deepest talent pools, you know, in the world there, stem to stern. It would be presumptuous for me to tell these guys what they've got to do. I mean, they're going to all figure it out really quickly. They've got great teams of people around them. And, you know, I think it's going to come down to what kind of show it puts on. These drivers always rise to the challenge. You know, you only have to look at, you know, Kyle Larson. You know, he went to Daytona the first time to run the 24 hours with Chip Ganassi. And I think in the first day or so was as quick as Dario Franchitti and Scott Dixon were doing. And Kyle hadn't done a lot of road racing up to that point, but, you know, the cream rises to the top. And I think these guys are going to figure it out quickly. And you never have to worry about the level of aptitude at that level of the sport.
Well said.
Yeah.
We've got another question this time from John, and he said he was a little bit late tuning in. So if this has already been addressed, which it hasn't, but he's talking about, you know, the treatments to the surface of the gears that you guys do to help, you know, fractional improvements as far as, you know, from, you know, the friction and everything that goes into it. And he made the comment that he's used carbon coatings in many of his engines, and a lot of times great success with that. Do you guys do anything more than just polish gears to get, you know, the performance enhancement to your product?
So for the surface treatment, we do shot peen them and then polish them, the rim polish process. We also, as a heat treat process, they get cryogenically treated. So that's kind of going on. As far as coatings, normally I would want to know what kind of oil you're using and what kind of problem you're trying to solve, and take a look and see what would be the best solution to solving that problem. As a kind of a general rule, there are some good coatings on there, but I'm not for just throwing coatings on gears just because you can. You really want to see what's going to solve a problem. We have in the past, and this is where I come back from Sondheim, on another competitor's gearbox, they were burning up dog rings and forks, just because the design, wasn't quite there, and they had some issues inside their gearbox with flex. But in like that situation, it was like, yeah, it looks to me like coating that with a carbon coater or the diamond-like coatings was going to help solve that problem. The problem was the fork running the dog ring. Once it engages, it shouldn't be really having any friction there, but that gearbox was. So this did solve that problem of heat that was getting created, and it's a good short-term solution for that problem with the coatings. I would go on to retake a look, and in our design, we spend a lot of time with the fork placement and dog ring placement. And that has to do with when you set up the gearbox at the mechanic level versus your 3D modeling the design and seeing all your all the tolerance stack ups and making sure that your prints are all accurate so that you're holding tolerances, that when everything stacks up, you don't have something in the wrong spot. So we spend a lot of time with that to try and solve that problem for them, making new shift drums in that case, making new forks for them after we kind of solve the problems they have. So for the most part, I look at, there are coatings, they do a lot. Look at the problem of why you think you have to have it. I also know, sometimes you can have it like those, when I talk about those engine RPMs, that was all coating. There's a lot to do with coatings that allowed them to take a normally aspirated engine and get it sprinting at 14,000 RPM. That's only going to happen with coatings. You can't, the materials aren't there for that. So there are specific things where coatings need to happen, but as far as in the gearbox, I try to take a look and see what problem's going on. Is there a gear design problem that's not allowing it to be working with the right oil that they want, or things like that? Why things are rubbing? Why are you creating all that heat? Because heat something you don't want to get rid of.
Sorry, hey John, explain to them, the people that are listening out there, a little bit about we just don't hob a gear. Explain to them a little bit what happens after we hob the gear and how we get that finish on there.
Okay, well, so we hob the gear to rough the shape out there. We send it to get heat treated. When we're heat treating, we want to minimize distortion. When you're going to our final process, which would be gear grinding, we want to make sure we're not taking off. You want to take off the least amount of material as you can, because the surface from the heat treater that's close to the outside has a lot of compressive stress, which really helps handle higher load. So you don't want to remove too much material. So then we profile grind it. So we use a CNC grinder to put the shape on that we want to have on there. And then in our inspection, so we use a Zeiss. So we're very specifically controlling the involute and modifying it. So we're able to go back in the design and remove some material. If the gears are going to be in an overloaded condition most of the time while they're racing, you want to add tip relief, but it's very important to get the amount of tip relief you want, because you still need to have the contact ratio, and you need to have a shape on the tips of your tooth and in the root of your tooth to allow for a strong hydrodynamic film to be created, because the oil sitting there, these are EP additive oils, so it's a chemical reaction that really is going to get them to separate the two steel from colliding. So you need to create kind of a ramp in and a ramp out effect so that you can make sure the chemical reaction happens right before the load gets put on. So we look at our design very specifically on the grinding to help alter the profiles.
Listening to all this about coatings and everything, I wanted to pose this question because we talked about lubrication or non-lubrication, like you mentioned earlier, with it Pocono running a transmission with no grease in or oil. By today's standards, if something, I get product from you, do you recommend like a cooling system? Do you have a way you would like to see, for a long range, racer for like 24 hour, 12 hour, 6 hour? Do you recommend a cooling system to circulate the oil?
Well, I'll go ahead, John. We want the if I had my way, there'd be a cooler that would be sticking up on the hood of the car with a rock guard over it, and the transmission would always stay about 180 degrees Fahrenheit. And I can see Chris snickering right now. But from an engineering point of view, that's hard to do. And the better you hide the cooler. And to answer your question, yes, we do. We recommend a cooler. That usually the car manufacturer dictates that. Testing dictates that. The Trans Am cars have electric fans. We have a customer, Sundry Racing, that races an Oldsmobile, an SVRA. Steve Cohen and Paul Fix drove the car. They won their class in overall Class D, and that's is a Trans Am car, but it was made for endurance racing, and it was a GT something back in the day. I don't remember, but it was a proper endurance IMSA racing car, and that transmission is designed for long racing. So that's cooled. They've got it in a good spot, and it runs cool. But these Trans Am cars, they get really hot. They push them to the limit of the oil every race, for sure.
Well, thank you for that, Larry. And gentlemen, it has been a pleasure. Unfortunately, I see the monitor has come back on the screen. You know, Francis is here and has let us know that our time has elapsed. And again, Chris, sorry I couldn't see you. Pleasure talking to you. John, thank you very much. And guys, thank you for making the sport of racing what you have with your product, your determination, and your perfectionism when it comes to the product that you do bring to the table. Because again, I've had experience with your gears, and I said it in the very beginning, I'll say it again. You made a lot of good race car drivers, great race car drivers. So keep up the good work.
Thank you.
Thank you.
The concept for EPARTRADE is basically, in my opinion, there's a big hole in the internet. So the internet started many years ago, but there's never been an online business community for racers on the World Wide Web. The need for EPARTRADE is actually quite obvious. Basically, people in the business of auto racing need a place online to hang out and get their problems solved.
It's extremely simple for a buyer or for a supplier to interact on the platform. The first thing you need to do is sign in, which is free. And the second thing is, when you see a product that you're interested in, all you need to do is click on request more information. If it's a company, you click on request more information, and then from there, it is forwarded directly to the buyer or to the supplier.
You can go to EPARTRADE.com, you become part of a community of businesses in racing, and it makes sourcing products much easier than just on the internet or using Google.
At EPARTRADE, there is no e-commerce. It's literally a connection just like at a trade show. So now, any time of the year, a buyer could reach out to a supplier through an email.
More than that, it's a place to go just to keep current every day. So it's a good place to start your workday in your racing business or in your offices of your professional race team. And you know you're current when it comes to new technology, industry news, technical papers, technical videos, all of that and more. We're not looking for a million hits per day. All we want is people who are really the volume buyers of racing products in the racing industry to be part of the little world of EPARTRADE. We have racing businesses participating from around the world. So you get suppliers from around the world, you get buyers from around the world.
EPARTRADE really eliminates having to travel, closing down your shop. Now you have a place to showcase globally your racing product and technology.
There are two types of people, racers and everyone else. Racer Magazine is for those who believe that racing is a way of life. Racer embodies the excellence that defines a sport driven by passion, courage, and ingenuity. Get 1 year of both Racer's print and digital edition for only $39 with instant access to our entire digital issue archive. Subscribe now at info.racer.com.